Welcome back, everybody. It is time to talk about one of my favorite franchises, even though it has had a funky history in the last decade, and that is Halo. Because the Halo Infinite campaign is out, there have been responses from Bungie on the general big shit show, which we haven't really covered. I mean, it got so messy that the Halo subreddit actually locked itself down for a while because stuff was just getting out of hand. We have had so many complaints, and I have got to be real with you. Halo Infinite, right now, it's like my favorite multiplayer shooter in a very long time. I'm really having a blast with the campaign, but I look at these criticisms, I can't disagree. Where's my SWAT mode? So I get it, and we're going to dive into it today, because this, everybody, is a fascinating story, and it's not just one for the Halo fans, actually. This is a fascinating story in walking the tightrope of a minimum viable product, because also there has been a Bloomberg report from Jason Schrier that gives us some color into the development, the friggin' messy, chaotic development that this game has had, to the point where it seems like it is a goddamn bloody miracle that we have actually got what we've got. It seems to be a true testament to a team basically being fucked, being really not in a great position, and thinking, okay, how do we salvage this? What can we cut so that what we ship is actually good? Battle Pass, etc. aside, monetization stuff aside, I mean the core game thing. So it is a very fascinating story, and that's what we're doing today. Right then, let's talk about the campaign launch, and we'll get into Schrier and all the other stuff in a little bit. So the campaign launched this week. Disappointment number one, there's not an official preload path for the Halo Infinite campaign. This did, of course, mean that no preload, so you just had to go and do, your big chunky download. Of course, if you're a COD player, you're going to think, well, 30 gigs, you chumps. Now, 343 did apologize for this. Now, I will say, here's the thing. I had to expense this one on the company account because I have Game Pass. The Xbox app didn't bloody work. And I tried for an hour and a half, but my situation was, I'm recording a video on this tomorrow. The Xbox Game Pass app will not let me access the game, so I'll just buy it in Steam. So yeah, I had to buy it in Steam. But, I mean, hey, at least I can write it off as a business expense, eh? But that was very frustrating, right? Just the idea that I have Game Pass for PC, and the Xbox app, which I have to be real, all right? Phil, the big dispenser himself, dispenser video games, I like you. I like your business model. The Xbox app absolutely sucks. It is bloody useless. The thing, I have just had so many issues with it. And I know a lot of other people that I know have had as well. Just the idea here that I own Halo Infinite, I have access to it via Game Pass. I open the app, and whenever I launch the game, the whole thing's just screwed. I mean, I had so many different issues. One, I tried to launch the game. It would open up basically a bunch of stuff about, like, services running on the computer. So I'm going around, I'm like, doing the stuff in the registry and looking up all the Microsoft support things. And then I realized, what? I don't have this problem in Steam. I don't have this problem on Origin or Uplay. Why do I have it in the Xbox app? Come on. You're Microsoft. You make Windows. And you're telling me that you're having a bunch of registry issues? What? Messed up. Okay, so that stuff's just absolutely not good. Probably not 343's fault. Probably Microsoft's fault, the game delivery end. But that's something that obviously did impact my experience, and I'm sure it impacted many of your experiences as well. Now, the numbers are, they're looking pretty good. We'll just have to see how they go. My expectation for Halo Infinite is that it's never going to be like the new CS or something, but much like with other Halos like Halo 3, I think it's just going to find its audience and then just be really quite stable for a good long time. But that will depend on if they can make the multiplayer suite robust enough through, progression, unlocks, customization, but also through doing playlists well, which we will get into. Now, there are some issues, like you can't replay campaign missions without starting a fresh save file. There's no mission select. And it is just that sort of thing here where, like, number one, that's a departure from Halo. I mean, obviously, they've said it's coming later. And they've said the main reason for its absence is that because this is more of an open world, non-linear game, it became incredibly challenging to do that. It's not that it doesn't work, it's just that it's not finished. And I mean, saving a loadout and a character state and using that for the start of a mission is really easy. I mean, okay, this is from the perspective of working, having worked in Unity. Maybe Slipspace doesn't have those features yet, doesn't have some of that stuff architected. It's one of those things with custom engines. They're going to be incredibly good at doing their thing, but a lot of the additional feature set that's really nice to have that, maybe you just want to have some splines and stuff really easily. So, you download a Unity package. Maybe those things like don't exist, which are, or a save load system or whatever. Not saying that they don't have that, obviously. It's just one of those things. When you're rolling a custom engine, you do just have to make every single thing yourself for the most part, right? Which is very different to a lot of the, the big off-the-shelf engines, which is why perhaps for games like this, there are really things that seem quite simple that if you were working in, in an off-the-shelf engine, you think, well, that should be easy to do. But there's probably lots of factors that only the engineers on this project would know that would actually make that, be challenging. So yes, they made the decision to just focus in on the current experience and then put like co-op and replaying missions in later. Interesting. Now that said, so far, not that the missions are hyper great. I really am enjoying the campaign, but it's just because the combat sandbox in the open world is surprisingly fun. But, I still want my big Halo set pieces, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to get them. Anyway, that's what's going on there. Multiplayer changes. The studio's been on blast, hasn't it? We all know it, right? And this has been really from a few things. And there just has been this trend, hasn't there, everyone, of a new game comes out and it's a regression in feature set from the one that came before it. Where is Team Doubles? Where is SWAT? Where is Infected? Where are they? Those are fun, right? Okay. They've just done this situation of making a great minimum viable product, but not really doing a great job on the rest. And we have this very, very big post from Sketch 5 days ago, who's like the main community guy, who basically said, I can't reply to everybody yelling at me /343 here, so I want to share a few things. He says, first, going to stress that he 100% understands and generally agrees with many of the frustrations, even if he doesn't agree with the attacks and the way in which some choose to express those feelings. Call me a shill, a liar, corpse speak, etc. as you want, but I've never lied to the community and never will. What I'd say is, generally speaking, I don't know if that's the I appreciate the communication, but I don't know if that is the best tactical play. Just some of that wording. But I suppose another side of this is that this doesn't really feel like a corporate PR release. It does actually feel like a guy's response. So maybe that's something that is more appreciated. Anyway, he goes on to say that he's not saying that him and 343 are the victim, but acknowledges that that's like a narrative that some people are choosing to apply, just saying it's his job to come here and listen, and then he goes on to actually talk about a few things. As for Slayer itself, we're still having discussions around feasibility, and in my head it's like, that's just a free-for-all mode. Of course it's feasible. Right? Put it in quick play, done. How's it not feasible to do Slayer? You're making a Halo game. These are the sorts of things that are confusing. And when I hear, things like discussions around the feasibility of Slayer, it's like, it's very hard to understand what the issue could be. I mean, if it's splitting the player base or something, it's like, well, you're Halo, you should have Slayer, you should have the game modes. I mean, I'm happy to have a slightly longer queue in order to go for the game mode that I want to play. I played Halo 3. I remember what those queue times were like. Even close to launch, its matchmaking system was slow. Now he says, I don't personally agree we owe folks a detailed dissertation on what 343 has been doing the last 6 years. Yeah, he doesn't owe people that. Jason Schrier might do it, though. Or whoever thought this was a good idea, etc. But we've had people working their asses off for years. And I'll talk about the Schrier thing, but TLDR, you can do a lot of work and end up going nowhere fast. And I think that's essentially what happened here. Now, he said the launch playlists were set up as they were to take a measured approach. They have UI limitations within the game right now in the way and the number of playlists that are exposed. Again, no. The only UI that I've worked with is some stuff, you know, like the Windows UI stuff, you know, for custom engine we did in uni, and Unity. And yeah, nobody enjoys working in UI. I mean, some people do, and God bless them, they're champions. But I find it very bizarre that you cannot add more elements to a list. I mean, these are just things that are odd. He says, we have complex and not ideal progression and talent systems intertwined in playlists and modes that are not necessarily trivial to decouple and change. Which makes it seem to me like there's a lot of technical debt. And this is something that's worth knowing, everyone. Sometimes, right, you can have an utter shit show in the back end, but the bit that you see looks polished. And that shit show, it's not because the engine's inherently bad, it's because the way that system has been architected has been done fast in a way that incurs technical debt. Technical debt is basically, imagine, for a more easy analogy, you know the way people say, measure twice, cut once? Well, imagine if you measure once, cut once, find out it's not ideal, and then make the best of it anyway. That's kind of what technical debt ends up like, where it takes you even more engineering time to do it right properly after you've done it quick and dirty the first time. It's why what you'll often do is, you know, you'll maybe game jam a game, you'll prototype it, you'll find some of the fun, and then you'll throw the whole thing in the bin, and you'll re-architect it, you know, properly. There's a difference between just fucking about, seeing what something's like, and then production code. So it does seem like there's a mess there, and they're acknowledging that. Now, the team's plans for a Slayer playlist are more robust than what might suffice in the interim, so they're trying to do something big there. QA is a huge dependency, and it's a critical part of the development pipeline that's been running non-stop for months, so I suppose they don't want to tax those people too much, which absolutely is a fair thing. And continuing on, basically talks about adding a vanilla Slayer playlist. And by the way, if you're not aware, Slayer is like free-for-all and TDM, right? But he did note that previously in Halo games, whenever there'd been an option to just do Slayer or Objective, it would kind of end up with the Objective playlist becoming unhealthy. Now that's interesting, you know, and yeah, sure, it would always be faster to find a Slayer game. And then that can be an issue because, of course, in a game like Halo, you're maybe are trying to think about how to get players to play the Objective. So that's kind of challenging. I would say the way to do that, though, is to not have challenges that get in the way of playing the Objective. That's one good way to help people play the Objective, and then find more rewarding ways to actually encourage people to play the Objective. He says it's not quite as trivial as just pushing a button because of the scale and complexity of the game. Yeah, you can push the button and then inexplicable things that confuse you just happen and go wrong because that's what computers are like. That's what game development is like, unfortunately. Then for people saying that all of this stuff is just a ploy to force challenge swaps, he says it isn't. Doesn't expect everybody to believe what he said, but does basically agree that, yes, we know the entire challenge system is not ideal. And I mean, that whole thing of like challenge swaps being a currency because an RNG gave you the wrong challenge or, you know, one that you don't want to do, it's just not particularly fun. And yeah, there's more work to be done here. And I mean, he even says, I did not really enjoy having to grind through 20 plus games of quick play to hopefully get oddball so I could hopefully win 3 times to complete a challenge. Or Shudder having to get 10 Ravager kills. Is this week's ultimate reward of just an emblem really worth the grind? There's a lot of work to do. We're all in agreement here. Now, I will say that is a type of communication that I really do appreciate, right? It's bringing the actual personal experience of this dude that seems pretty damn close to ours. And then just saying, you know, not everyone likes it. Infinite is a free-to-play game and thus has a new business model based on the monetization of customization. He says he understands where people are coming from, especially with a 20-year established franchise with a long-standing legacy. And I bloody agree. I want a color picker. I want a color picker for my dude. You know? The way that it's like grind to the very end of a battle pass and you'll get a slightly different looking shin plate. That's so lame. So it's this situation where they I mean, what are they doing? What are they doing? I do not like it. You know, for me, I'm just happy that I enjoy the game a great deal, so I'm having a blast, and I'm super happy with it, but it does frustrate me the way that they have done it. It's the sort of thing where, you know, it could really feel like you could have Fashion Halo as a really cool, you know, end game for people, but, you know, it's just like with Fashion Destiny. No, it's all just money, and then when it comes down to money, there's no... I mean, I see somebody who has the little katana, or whatever, you know, DLC or paid cosmetic, and it's like, okay, you didn't get the one from the event because it was impossible to get that in the first week of the event, so you just bought it. And they clearly put it at like the latter bit of the event track, and then put a similar one on the store so that people would find out they couldn't earn the event one in the first go of the event, but they'd want it, so then they'd go to the store and buy it. And like, that just feels like I'm being fucked around whenever I see a game do that. So he goes on to say, you know, but this is a business. The servers you play on cost money to operate. The studio that develops and maintains the game costs money. Battle Pass and premium customization is the model for this game today. Is there room to continue assessing the overall economy and value for players? Absolutely. That's also an area where the team is monitoring and learning. The creation of cosmetics and the Battle Pass is absolutely nothing to do with something like the playlist issue. That content was created ages ago, is static, and wasn't done instead of playlists. Was the priority to make sure the game could in fact generate revenue? Of course. And yes, no, of course that is true. It does feel weird from a big established franchise like this, where it's a pivot. It also feels weird because it's a Microsoft first party. It feels like this is the kind of like, you know, the big system seller, the big Microsoft thing. And that's why it feels very strange to have these sorts of things go on. In the same way that if Sony, you know, like if Sony did the exact same thing with one of their things, it would feel weird to you, wouldn't it? You know, because you kind of expect, you know, it's Halo, you expect the premium, you know, treatment. So it does feel weird. Anyway, I appreciate Sketch going to the community and making this. You know, and yeah, look, it's the sort of thing I think for some people, you know, it is just quite hard to take a lot of that, you know, feedback, especially when the feedback does come in a very disrespectful way. But frankly, Sketch, you know, you'll never see this video, but all I'll say, Sketch, is whenever I see that katana belt attachment be in a bit of the event pass that I can't earn in week 1, but then be on the store, whenever that happens, I do feel like I'm being fucked. And that doesn't feel good. So, basically, business model's not great. Comes at the expense of customization. I used to have a color picker of, you know, primary, secondary, tertiary colors. Now that's all money, and that feels bad. In the same way a Destiny 1 player would unlock a shader, then in Destiny 2, they were, you know, consumables. This shit just feels bad. Just feels bad. And the whole playlist thing, like, SWAT. I want SWAT. Give me SWAT, please. That's just me, frankly speaking, as a player. One of the things that made Halo 3, even though it didn't have the most humongous player base for a long time, one of the things that really made it just sort of be strong and stable is that it had those additional playlists, those cool, unique things, not just the core game mode. And I think it's a big loss that those things aren't there. Now, we have some development insights from Bloomberg's Jason Schrier. Now, well, actually, no, it's by Dinah Bass and Jason Schrier. Now, I will say, it does feel that, like, since Jason has moved over to Bloomberg, you know, he's had to write for a slightly different audience. Like, there's some explaining of what Halo is here, where it feels like perhaps if he was at another outlet, we would get more juicy details. But, I mean, I don't really criticize him for it, because I understand that, you know, when you're writing, you have to write for your audience. And, you know, this is for Bloomberg, behind a Bloomberg paywall, right? And that's not really the gaming audience. But here's the deal. Even within Microsoft, there was wide acknowledgement that releasing a half-baked demo was a big mistake. We should have known better and just be honest with ourselves, Phil Spencer said in a recent interview with British GQ. We were not yeah, we were there not out of deception, but more out of hope. And I don't think that's a great development strategy. Yeah. Now, to get into some of the things here. So Microsoft recruited Joseph Staten, who was the lead writer of the first 3 Halos, to return to the franchise that, of course, he left in 2009. And, he basically talks about, Halo has had bumpy introductions, a disastrous demo for the first Halo game in 2001 that almost doomed it. Of course, the Halo 2 demo that ended up not being representative of Halo 2 because of humongous technical issues. We've had rough demos over the years, that is true, but this demo was also pretty rough. So basically what happened is, right, Joseph comes back, he ended up being quite integral into getting Halo Infinite back on track. He persuaded Microsoft to give 343 as much time as they needed to fix it, and he leveraged Halo's importance as a console seller as the main reason to make sure that things are actually right. Now, they made this mistake before, obviously, with Master Chief Collection, which, awesome product, fucked launch. Now, development difficulties, and this is where I want to talk about game engine stuff. Halo's engine was actually built on Bungie's old code. One toolset, called Faber, became infamous at the studio for being buggy and difficult to use. Some of Faber's code dated to the early 2000s, and some 343 engineers called it technical bankruptcy. And Jason goes on to basically explain technical debt, which I believe I've already done in this video. Technical debt hits all of us. It's hit us. It hits everyone in development. It's always just an interesting thing to manage, because sometimes, you really want to plow ahead, get the features in, and see if they're actually fun before you commit all of the time and the resources into making more, proper, thoroughly documented, production-ready code that you could swap any programmer onto, and with the documentation, they'd know exactly what to do. But sometimes, as I'm sure you all know from your own job, and it's the same for us, sometimes you have to sacrifice doing things perfectly in order to get them done because they have to be done on a deadline. Now, one of the issues here is, and this could tie into some of the other things we've talked about, a game engine it's a pretty hard to understand thing if you're not actually in game development, because a lot of people just see an engine as a pretty monolithic thing. I mean, here, Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, Frostbite, you're totally going to think that, and that's a very fair thing, and customers should not be expected to have a technical understanding of all of these things. Same with the Creation Engine as well. But really, an engine is just a set of tools, right? So you can have a situation where the Slipspace engine, in terms of some very fundamental things, it's rendering, it's lighting, it's, even just some, let's just say, nerdy back-end shit, could be way, way, way better. But imagine that's just kind of like the star upon which the rest of the engine orbits. And, you want all your different other little systems. So what you can have is a very old Halo engine that is basically fucking busted. And a new programmer who comes in, who's fresh out of uni on all of not fresh out of uni, but who's up to date on all the latest coding practices and the newest engines and the way to do things right, looks at this engine and thinks, oh dear God, what is going on? But that engine that's busted, that is old, even though it has a lot of technical debt, technical bankruptcy even, it at least has the modules that will result in the features that you want, right? Whereas when you build your big new fancy engine, like with a Slipspace engine, okay, you've got the thing built, but all the little extra tools, all the little extra features, all of the things that got developed over, 15 years of Halo development aren't there. So you have to build those things from scratch, which just does make it a humongous endeavor. So if they're in this really weird situation where, you've got the core of the Slipspace engine, maybe they're integrating with some old things, and it just ends up being this big old disaster, that obviously has held them back. Also, 343 heavily relied on contract workers, and Microsoft restricted contract workers from being around for more than 18 months. What? So that just means they have constant attrition. And this is so mind-bogglingly stupid. I'm sure there is a reason for it, but look, you're dealing with technical bankruptcy. This Faber code, dating back to the early 2000s, that means you need to be brought up to speed on it to understand all of its intricacies and, let's just say, its character. I'm sure, to any other coders out there, sometimes you just open up a project and you look at it and you're like, well, this is a mess, but it has character. It sure does have the mark of its maker on it. To get somebody up to speed in that, it's not just standard production code where it's all well documented and great. You basically have to get into the mind of the bastard who made the damn thing 5 or 10 years ago. So it takes time to get those people up to speed. And then you're saying you get these people up to speed, but it's an 18-month contract and then they're gone. What? That's madness. There's also issues in the creative direction, which according to Bloomberg was in flux and usually late in its development. Several devs described 343 as a company split into fiefdoms. Cool. So we just have lords and dukes. With every team jockeying for resources and making conflicting decisions. I mean, does that just not sound like the worst of a dysfunctional corporate structure? One developer describes the process as 4 or 5 games being developed simultaneously. Yeah. Still, the timing of the release doesn't seem up for discussion. Microsoft told 343 it had to have the game ready for the next Xbox, which meant November 2020, which is why it was a mess. And that's why it's great that this game has been delayed. Now, what's interesting here, and we'll get into this, right? So, by the end of summer 2019, Halo Infinite was in crisis. The studio decided to cut almost 2/3 of the entire planned game. And really, that to me is why... I look through, I'm playing Halo Infinite and it feels cheap. Now, I don't actually mean that as a diss. I know that's going to seem really backhanded if a Halo dev happens to come across this video. Maybe cheap's the wrong word. Thrifty. Economical. Something with a positive connotation. As in, you had your open world, you had to make the best of it, and all things considered, you did a remarkable job at that. And that is my current opinion. Because there's a lot of asset reuse in this game. If you are ready for Forerunner Ruins, boy howdy. And there's some previous Halo games, I think it was Halo 4, that had a lot of very repetitious, or was it 5? Anyway, had very repetitious gameplay segments. And that doesn't feel, as great. Not as many set pieces in this Halo, from what I've seen so far, and from what I've been led to understand by reviewers like SkillUp, who I have a lot of respect for. But from what they had, they've turned it into something surprisingly good. This game has had me consistently grinning. So it's incredible what they've done. So eventually, right, they were going to go with this humongous open world Zelda-like experience. And if you had said that to me 2 years ago, I would have thought, oh god, no, don't give me that. I can now get where they're coming from, frankly. Zeta Halo is really fun to grapple hook around. And even though it's like standard Ubisoft game, the traversal is fun. The actual upgrading your stuff, oddly enough, has been fun. I'm enjoying it. But it does seem like they basically had to cut down to the bare minimum and do the best they could with it. And as far as a story like that goes, hats off to them for the campaign. But that's just what happens. You can hear that this, and Mr. Sketch up here talked about, the whole what have we been doing for 6 years? It's been pretty obvious. They've been building this game for 6 years. It's just that not everything they built was useful. There's another game like this, actually, and that game is Mass Effect Andromeda. And I think this game's absolutely came out better. But Andromeda had that thing go on where it didn't have the most clear creative direction. Its development was very broad and expansive. At one point, there was going to be like loads of procedural universe stuff, like a big, expensive version of Mass Effect 1. But then that was cut. And then we end up with this game that ends up being the best they could crunch out in, a year and a bit before the game comes out, or 18 months before the game comes out. And it seems like that's what's happened here. Just that they've been really intelligent with their decisions. And I have to wonder, is it the case that many of our complaints right now are the price for a Halo that is smaller in feature set, but what's there is pretty excellent? Monetization issues put to the side. So it's a very interesting story of game development that I just wanted to have a chat with you about today. I think, though, as a longtime Halo fan, look, Halo's just... Most of these games have been a bit of an internal disaster, it seems. Maybe not Halo Reach. But, look at the whole story of Halo 2 with the absolute crazy technical issues, that they had. Look at Halo 4 not really knowing where it is Look at Halo 5 trying to make Spartan Locke the coolest cucumber in the land. You know, this is a franchise that's always had its troubles, but it's usually been able to fight its way through them. And I'm very happy we've got what we have got. But I can't help but wonder, what would it have been like if this started development in 2015 and didn't have all this chaos? We'll never know. Maybe Halo Infinite 2, or whatever the next one will be, will benefit from all this chaos having happened, and maybe them now having a pretty strong and stable base with the franchise having renewed relevance. Certainly, I'll say this. See Zeta Halo? It's cool. But what if you gave me a bunch of scarabs just creepy crawling about the place on the map? Make them there as big map markers. Super scarabs. And actually bring them into the open world sandbox. You know? What if you add more unique dynamic elements to this world? What if you add almost Guild Wars 2-like events where the Marines get pushed back and forth and all that? There's a lot of potential for open world Halo, but I do not want it to come at the expense of big, cool set pieces, because I think that is also part of the Halo experience. I'll have to see what it's like by the time the credits roll. That's it for me. Do let me know how you've been finding this game, and if you are a developer, any insights would be very interesting to hear. Obviously, the experience that we have is working on a significantly smaller game that is less complex to code, was extensively pre-produced, has not went through any major overhauls, and I would say has been coded rather excellently from the get-go. You know, we've had none of these issues. So if you have, if you are a dev who has worked in one of these, projects that's really struggled in the AAA, do let us know what your experience has been like. Have a wonderful day, everyone. I'll see you next time.